Hi, I'm Sarah Flower, and you are listening to KSUT Tribal Radio. Coming up here in the state of Colorado, it is the primary election. If for those who've got your ballots in the mail, they are, get those in soon, and then also you can drop them off in drop boxes. Primary day is June 25th, and simultaneously, the League of Women Voters of La Plata County is showing a film called Undivide Us that will be down at the Durango Public Library coming up on that same Tuesday. So to talk about that film and have some civil dialogue about that and what's happening just in democracy in general. We've got a couple of women joined with us here today. In studio is the president of the League of Women Voters of La Plata County, Lori Meiniger, as well as over on the phone, we are joined with Christy Kendall, the director of the film Undivide Us, which some locals may have seen at the Durango Independent Film Festival this past year. Ladies, thanks so much for joining us here today to have this important conversation.
Our pleasure.
Happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for joining us over on the phone as well. Christy, I want to start with you as to give the listeners a synopsis about the film Undivide Us. And then Lori will go back to you to talk about the importance of hosting it here.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. The film really came out of me as a director. I'd been a journalist for years. I was a producer at ABC News 2020 and then worked a lot in film. And looking at what was going on in the political situation in this country and really feeling pretty hopeless and just kind of despondent about what kind of world I was leaving for my kids to grow up into, frankly. And so I started doing what journalists do, though. I did some research, and I came across a book by a guy named Tony Woodleaf called I, Citizen. And in the book, Tony talked about how we really are kind of fed and our brains take in something that's really not true about this country. It is not true that the vast majority of Americans are hating on each other all the time. That's really more an artifact of the media and the politicians who kind of benefit by the more enraged and the more clickbait we click on and the more outrageous stuff we watch. He actually had all this social science that pointed out that actually the vast majority of Americans are, they do disagree about really important stuff, but that they are civil, they're respectful, they can engage in civil dialogue without going completely bonkers on one another. And I thought to myself, well, if I, as a journalist, was I was despondent and hopeless about the country, I bet a lot of other people are that way too. So how could I make a movie that showcased Americans doing what Americans actually, according to the social science, can do really well, which is talk to each other about these really complicated, heavy things like guns, abortion, immigration, policing. And so the movie is literally an experiment in going around the country, having those kinds of conversations with people who legitimately disagree with each other about really important things. And I have to tell you, what we found is amazing. It actually will give you a lot of hope for this country, and hopefully some confidence and some bravery to step into those kind of sticky spaces where maybe the social media has been teaching you don't want to, gosh, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to ever say that I think something because someone might disagree with you. Like, disagreement is okay. And I think that right now Americans are feeling really scared. A lot of us are feeling really scared to just step into that social space. And so this movie is kind of a thought experiment in what happens when you do step into those spaces. And I think what it finds is pretty nice.
I have so many more questions for you, Christy, about the process of it all, and as a fellow journalist walking through that. But I'm going to pause on that, and I want to go to Lori to talk about where listeners can go to watch the film and participate in some dialogue, like Christy had mentioned.
Yeah, so I want to start by saying I was one of those people who saw the film at the Independent Film Festival back in March. And at the end of the film, I I probably just practically tackled Christy and said, oh my gosh, this is a message that people need to hear. So how can we get that out? So with the League of Women Voters, what we chose to do on primary day is actually that evening, while everybody's waiting for the results of our votes that day, we're showing the film at the public libraries in Durango, Memphis, Dolores, and Cortez.
It's awesome.
And we thought so too. Like, let's get the wide community together to be able to come together in community conversation. So we'll show the film at each of those locations, and then we're inviting people to stay after the film, have a little bit of dinner, and have some discussion with their neighbors.
And I think it's important to note the diversity of conversation of, the differences of everybody coming to that, the dinner table, so to speak, figuratively and literally.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, my mom did a couple of really great things. And whether she knew she was doing it or not to raise kids who were capable of conversation later in life, there was no subject that could not be talked about at our dinner table. And in fact, she encouraged civil discussion and civil disagreement. So one of the things that Christy just said was, none of us agree on everything. And in fact, I think that's one of the strengths of our country. The founding fathers didn't agree on everything, and we've been working on the Constitution ever since then to fix some of those things that have changed over the course of the history of our country. But as neighbors, we all don't agree. I don't live on a street that's all one political party. I'm sure you don't either. None of us do, right? And even if we did, we might have some variations of what we believe within the party. But this isn't about party, we don't think. We think it's about neighbors being able to come together with a diversity of experiences, backgrounds, and opinion, and to be able to feel safe in a space in our community to be able to talk about their opinion. And that's one of the brilliant things in the film. The experiment, as Christy calls it, showcases a few groups around the country who did exactly that, came together with a wide divergence of opinions on key issues, and were able to have some genuine, thoughtful conversation, and not to change each other's mind about it, but to have more empathy and understanding about where people are coming from. For how do we arrive at our opinions? What motivates us to want to share those opinions? What are we afraid of when we don't want to share those opinions? And giving people kind of an equal playing field to have a conversation.
It seems as though in the last, say, decade or so, the temperature has really turned up in terms of divisiveness, which is why I really, Christy, love the title of the Undivide Us topic. And curious for you what that was like to go across the country and to engage in that civil discourse. How do you find those people who want to talk and are able not only to talk, but to listen? Walk me through that process of interviewing your everyday American and getting their insight on topics and hopefully community.
I mean, that is a great question, because I think one of the things that journalists often do is we look around us and we talk to people who we see around us, right? To find out, like, what are you thinking? And we try to pull from different places, right? But it's tricky and get people with different backgrounds, and it can be hard. So we actually hired a market survey company that is actually kind of a professional group that specializes in getting a wide range of folks to come to the table with really broad opinions and backgrounds. And I feel like it was really one of the strengths of the film. The folks that you end up seeing are pretty representative of the communities that we were visiting, kind of with in the same way that no one person is a reflection of any other person. But I didn't trust myself to go and find these folks,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't trust any other one person. So we did use that market research firm, and that's how we kind of came up with people. And then we specifically looked for people who also had strong views, but we did like keep out people who I would qualify as, who we defined as like toxically polarized. And here's what I meant by that. If you answered on a scale of 1 to 10, if you answered a 9 or 10, that you could not be friends with somebody who disagreed with you politically, and you answered the question, could you have a conversation with someone who disagreed with you politically, as like, no, I couldn't, at a 9 or 10. If you answered both those questions at a 9 or 10, we disqualified you from participating, because I really wasn't interested in, because there are people who are more interested in the fight than they are in the solution, right? And that is not representative of our country, certainly, but those people do exist out there. And so we did weed those people out. But that doesn't mean we don't have really strong personalities in the group, who think really really different things about important things. I mean, one conversation that comes to mind is conversation around guns that we had, and we literally had somebody who's, and we didn't know this at the time, someone whose child's father had been killed by gun violence in the previous months, sitting next to a guy who carries a gun pretty regularly for safety, because he works construction late at night in Pittsburgh. And they have very different views on the roles of guns, but they actually became, and that was not just in the film, like after the taping, they kind of, these two unlikely, collaborators became friends. It was really interesting. I think they ended up inviting each other to each other's weddings. That's not in the film, but like, people, to say that people were excited to have the opportunity and the kind of being given the permission to have these conversations, like people are hungry for it. And Lori, I don't know if you think, but I think that even in the screenings that we've had, and I've seen this at film festivals all over the country, people following up after the film festivals, like they want to keep talking. They almost, I think America is like ready for a catharsis here, to be like, we don't have to, we can hold ideas strongly, but we don't have to be scared of our fellow citizens. I mean, that's not to say there aren't a few scary folks out there. There definitely are. But I think we need to have faith that most people aren't like that.
Well, and I think that's why when we were thinking about how we wanted to show the film in the Four Corners, it was really important for us to create an opportunity for people to stay after the film and to be able to talk about whatever comes up for them in watching the film. And we're going to do that with some folks who've been trained to be facilitators in conversation. And so the other side of that, too, and you talked about this, like, we all know people who maybe are on one extreme or another about lots of different things. Our intention is not to try to get all the extremists in a room and somehow we're all going to leave holding hands.
You don't have a marketing person that's
we do not.
People.
But our invitation is wide open to anyone and everyone in our larger community who's interested in coming and being in a conversation. And that it doesn't preclude you because of any place you live, any experience you've had, any politics. It's really about bringing people together, because I agree with Christy, and we know anecdotally and scientifically there are more people in our country who agree, who are in sort of that middle than who are at the far extremes. It's just the people at the far extremes who are getting a lot more attention than the rest of us who really do want to be in conversations in our communities, because that's where we're strong.
I don't know how the other 5 counties in southwest Colorado, but La Plata County alone is over 50% unaffiliated or independent. So somewhere more in the middle to have this.
Yeah. And statewide, I'll just add, I think that number is somewhere between 45 and 50% now for the state. So to me, that says there's a lot of people who aren't buying into extremist discussion or extremist
performative politics.
Yeah.
I've heard that term before. We are joined here talking about an event that's hosted by the League of Women Voters of La Plata County and different chapters throughout the region.
Right. We're doing that with Montezuma County as well.
That will be happening in particular here at the Durango Public Library coming up on Primary Day, which for us here is June 25th, and then over in Cortez as well, Dolores, Mancos, all on Primary Day, which is really important. Joined via the phone is the director of a film that will be showed, Undivide Us. We're joined here with Christy Kendall as well as the president of the League of Women Voters of La Plata County, Lori Meiniger, talking about this and the division and the timing of this, ladies, I don't think could be more prime as we are coming up on a very big presidential election in November. And a reminder, too, for the listeners that the League of Women Voter of La Plata County and all League of Women Voters are nonpartisan organizations. So I think that's important to drive home of this Undivide Us, that everybody's invited to come to the table. And, you know, Christy, what you had said earlier in wanting to do this film of you thinking about your children and the future of it, I think as a mother myself, I think of young girls, I think of what this is going to be like for them and the division that the country has really felt like, and how to have this conversation with our kids who are always watching and at a time with social media and flags and signage that are becoming more verbose than ever. I think it's important to have conversations like this. So not only at the table with two divisive opinions, but also how you just talk about this in general to turn that. I think that's the responsibility of parents moving forward. What was your message for you, Christy, when this was all said and done, that you really took home with from Undivide Us?
Well, it's funny that you would bring up my kids. I mean, my kids came to the film premiere, and my kids are teenagers, and they're New York City teenagers, and they are not, like, regularly nice to me. You know what I mean? Like, they love me, but they're not going to just, like, give me compliments. I'll just say that.
They're teenagers, sure.
They're teenagers. But they went to the film, and they afterwards both asked me if they could bring it to their school because they felt like, and honestly, when I got the text message from my son in the cab on the way home, I started to cry. I was just like, wow, because for them to feel like this conversation needs to happen with their own peer group, I think is actually kind of very symbolic of where we all are as a country. I think one of the key takeaways from the film is that people don't change their minds about things. Like, people aren't going to come into a conversation and like you're not going to have some sort of forum where then people are going to walk in and change their minds. Like, nobody changed their minds in the conversation, but they completely changed their minds about how they felt about the people on the other side of the conversation. And that, like, citizen engagement, that citizen compassion, I think, for one another that we can have, and the respect that we could have for each other, even with people who disagree with us. I've heard there's been critiques of social scientists where they were like, there is a right and a wrong. We can't have both sides-isms about everything. And this isn't actually saying that this isn't taking on that perception, actually. All I'm saying is that I think we benefit as a society if we can at least try to understand where the other person is coming from. We don't have to shift what we think at all, but like just that understanding, I think it can really help us all like feel like we want to be part of this amazing, incredible, diverse country that we live in.
I think here in the Four Corners region in these 5 counties, it is a total mix of red and blue and rather purple in this region. And as I mentioned earlier, the independent voice that's also at the table. I mean, I really think we're at a prime spot to be hosting this. And I love that La Plata County and Montezuma's League of Women Voters chapters are combining to be able to do this, and the importance that shows the unity throughout the region of how important this film is.
So
can I just say, Lori is a force of nature too. She's incredible.
Thanks. When you were speaking, one of the things I was thinking about, so the League of Women Voters, we have a book group. And one of the books we read a few months ago was a book entitled The Obligations of Citizenship. The Bill of Obligations, rather, by Richard Haas, who has published many books. And he, in that book, lays out 10 things that he thinks that are important for us as citizens of this country. To be informed, to vote, to participate in the democracy. I see it on stickers and shirts, and people say it all the time. Democracy is not a spectator sport, right? It requires all of us to be engaged. And when we give up our engagement, my mom used to say, then you get what you get, right? If you're not going to vote, you don't have the right to complain. You don't have the, it's because you haven't participated. But one of the things he talks about, one of those responsibilities that we have as citizens is what Christy was just talking about. And that's empathy. Like, empathy doesn't mean that we have to like you, but we can have some compassion and some understanding for what your situation is or what got you to this point in your life, right? I can have some understanding for the circumstances that may have gotten you to a particular opinion on something. And I think that, to me, is one of the foundational strengths, of being human, and certainly required in the kind of democratic society that we live in. And in order to maintain that, we're not just inviting people to come to the table and be nice, right? In fact, it's okay with us if you're not nice, right? But to be willing to come and listen to your neighbors. I say all the time, my grandson, I just spent 10 days with a 10-year-old. And one of the things that he says is, I don't have to listen to tell you what I want to tell you, but I want to listen so that I can understand something about you. And that's really what we're inviting people to come and do.
I love that. And I think, not that we're going to solve the world's problems in this half hour, but it would be great if we did. But I think when we talk about this division, too, when you said come together as neighbors, I think so much division that I have seen personally with my friends and family is the division of we no longer talk. We don't see things on the same playing field. And kind of like, Christy, what you had mentioned, the people who are 9s and 10s in your personal life in the last 10 years, it has been a real division of families that I think is crushing to see. And maybe it's always been there, and maybe I'm just paying more attention to it. But that, I think, is what's so disheartening of, like, boy, somebody who was, my aunt or uncle or best friend that we just don't see eye to eye politically means we're not friends or in touch anymore. I mean, I think that loss has been really hard to see.
There's actually a brilliant... I'm just going to plug your film a little bit because there's a brilliant part of that film where people who've been lifelong friends make the effort to overcome the rift that develops between the two of them. They still have very, very strong opposing opinions, but were able to come to agreement about what mattered to them, which was being friends, right? That mattered more than I'm going to hold on to my strong opinion about this thing or the other. It happened over a cocktail. We're not going to offer cocktails, but but I think that kind of commitment to being for something, for that relationship, for community, for understanding, rather than digging ourselves into a big old deep trench where, like, we're just going to be against everything. There's no value in that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in my own life, even with both. My mom is much more on the right. My husband is much more on the left. And I have used some of the techniques from this film, like literally in both my marriage and talking about these issues, and with my mom. And I have and lots of friends who have said that they've used some of this. I mean, the conversation technique is really an interesting one. We don't kind of put it out there as like the be all end all. There are a lot of kind of techniques for conversation that can be really useful. But I do think that coming away from watching the film, people have told me, gosh, I couldn't stop thinking about that. And I thought about it when I had a conversation with my teenager, whomever in their life. Because I think in the last, 4 to 8 years, we've all been through a lot of stuff, with the political situations, with COVID, with, just a lot going on in this country. And I think having a few more tools in our toolkit is something that we all can use. I almost want to guarantee people if they come to the film and stick around for dinner afterwards, they are going to feel both feel like they have more tools in their toolkit and feel more hopeful about the country.
Lori, you're nodding.
I am nodding. Yeah. That's certainly my experience in watching the film. And when I left that film, for me, it was reaffirming what I've just keep holding on to is this hope of that we're not these loud, divisive voices, that we really are a country striving to work together as a nation that in a way that betters us as a nation and betters us as individuals.
We have just 3 minutes left. It goes by pretty fast, ladies. I feel like we could do this for a full hour and still not touch on everything. Christy, I want to go to you and give some final thoughts or comments or a push for the film where people can find out more information about Undivide Us.
Yeah, if you are not able to go to one of these awesome screenings that the League of Women Voters are putting on, please feel free to go to undivideusmovie.com. We are hosting more screenings. There'll be updates there if you subscribe to how to reach the film. We're trying to roll it out to more and more folks because we just want it to get out there to help. I mean, there's no one film, there's no one thing that's going to heal what's going on, but in this country. But I think each of us doing our little part with what we can, I see the film as part of that for sure. And we want to be part of that. So undivideusmovie.com is the website, and we'd love to also, after you go to the screening, we'd love to know what you think about it. So please let us know.
One way or the other, huh? Get ready when you make that
totally.
announcement.
No, that's true. I mean it though, because even we haven't gotten a ton of critiques, and we do invite them. But I'm happy to learn because I really am. I'm committed. What I want is for the world to be different for all of our kids to grow up into, where they feel like they can engage in the things that they care the most about, and feel that is going to be received by their fellow community members and their fellow citizens. And that they can have agency. I want my kids to feel like they have agency in this world that we live in.
Well said. Lori, for you, final thoughts.
So I'm going to do a shameless plug.
Bring it.
So the film will be shown across the public libraries, like we said, Durango, Mancos, Dolores, and Cortez. We are asking people to sign up ahead of time so that we know how many people are coming. You can do that by going to lwvlaplata.org. Sign up on our website. And, I've been thinking a lot about this. So here, there's a few things that I think I know. One of which is that as humans, we want to be seen and heard, right? What goes with that in my mind is that we are neighbors. We are not enemies. And so this is an open invitation to the community to come, be seen, be heard with your neighbors.
A week from today, that is primary day. What better way to celebrate that other than to vote is to come and check out Undivide Us being shown again throughout Montezuma and Durango at the public library. Lori Meiniger and Christy Kendall, thanks so much for joining us today on this very important topic here on KSUT Tribal Radio.